All right, let's move into our module of the week. And for that, we're going to bring in Martin Anderson Klutz, a senior solutions engineer at Acquia and a maintainer of a number of Drupal modules and recipes of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, John. Have you ever wanted your Drupal site to provide a widget that allows visitors to go over to the dark side of your theme? There's a module for that. It's called DarkmodeJS, and it was created in May 2022 by Arthur Bagdasarian of Last Call Media. It has a 1.0.7 version available, which works with Drupal 9, 10, and 11. And it is actively maintained and has security coverage. There is one open issue, which is a bug against the current branch, but is postponed, waiting for more info, all of which is pretty good considering the site is officially in use by 89 sites. Now, the module is a wrapper for the DarkmodeJS library, which gets 1,000 weekly downloads according to NPM. That library does have its own demo tutorial site, so if you want to understand the options it exposes, we will have a link for that in the show notes. The module provides options to control where on the page you want the widget to appear, what colors it should use, whether or not to store a user's choices in cookies, and whether or not to automatically match a visitor's OS theme settings of light or dark. Installing the module currently requires making some changes to your site's composer.json file, then configuring how you want the widget to appear, and finally placing the block in your site theme. The module also doesn't currently include a schema file for its configuration, which can cause some challenges, particularly for sites that run automated tests. But let's talk about DarkmodeJS.
I am always on the fence with dark mode, right? I mean,
Oh,
it depends on the site. There's some sites where I use exclusively in dark mode. There's some sites that I refuse to use dark mode in. And then I do have an add-on that I use to just add dark mode sometimes when something doesn't have it. And I find that it sometimes breaks sites in unexpected ways. It sometimes doesn't detect that the text was lighter or darker, and then you just can't see anything. um, I have to say, in the past year or two, I've definitely I'm more on the side of I use dark mode more often, I think, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's like and it makes the experience better, or I'm just more used to it. But this looks like a nice little widget to as long as you can configure whether or not it does that flash animation. I think it's a nice little widget.
my guess is because we're all getting older and dark mode is easier on the eyes. But hey, that's my 2 cents.
Could be.
I will
To
say,
be
Nick, there
fair,
is a time setting in there. So I think there is that you can control how long the transition is when somebody switches over. Um, and in terms of
10
getting
minutes later.
10 minutes like, sure. It's like, am I having a seizure or is the site getting slowly darker? I personally got used to using dark mode on my mobile devices because, like with an OLED screen, it actually consumes less power if the
Oh,
screen is mostly dark. And so for some of my older phones, it would struggle to sort of make it through the day without recharging. Switching to dark mode was really helpful, and that's probably why I've tended to use it more. But
Martin likes to have the brightness all the way up on his phone, so that's another reason. Matt, what were you gonna say?
I'll say I don't use dark mode, and it's
Oh,
funny that
really?
only when writing PHP code do I use a dark theme. Like when I write in Rust or Go, it's a light theme in my editor.
interesting.
And like, yeah, and even on my phone, I just opt for the grayscale the entire screen versus dark mode because usually dark mode themes aren't that legible to me. But if it's all grayscale, it works fine.
Interesting. Huh.
Why
Yeah.
why do you think that you do that with IDEs? Is it
It's
That's
just
interesting.
because know why? I think I know why. In middle school, I wrote C sharp. I did that in Visual Studio Net. That was a light theme. When I did
Uh,
PHP, when I started doing web development, it was Aptana Studio, and that was a dark theme by default.
it's so funny how
Between JavaScript and dark theme.
yeah, it's so funny how you can wire like that. Like it affect like I'm sure you could eventually overcome that, but it's funny how like it just feels more natural just because
Yeah.
you were first introduced like that. That's
I
funny.
really I really like, I don't know. I'm always like, it's just easier on my eyes. Like I'm staring at screens all day and like, I don't know, just looking at black is easier. I don't know. That's all I got. However, getting back to the module for a brief second there, that this is front end only, Martin. Like, so like your front end users can switch back and forth. Is it in the admin as well?
It's a great question. I would imagine if you were to place the block widget in your admin theme as well, it might work there as well. But then again, if you really wanted dark mode in your admin theme, you could just use Gin, which has that feature built in already.
Yeah, I could do that. I kind of moved away from Gin. I guess I could move back to it. I don't know. Anyway, okay. So front end dark mode, JS library. This sounds okay. I mean, do you happen to know if there are reasonable fallbacks if you don't have JS enabled? I know that's like a totally 1995 question to ask, but I'm just curious.
I would imagine if you have JS disabled, then nothing would happen. You would see the sort of default coloring of your site theme.
I was just looking for like everything to be black. Like people can't even reach your site.
It seems like the type of module that's relatively easy to turn on, but then in practice, you're designing a whole theme where you're making all these color choices. Well, you already have to think about accessibility, and then you are adding a whole other level of things to test. So you turn that on, and then, is the color contrast enough on button hover state, even in dark mode? So it seems like it could be significantly more QA on a project.
Yeah, that's definitely good. Yeah, definitely a good point. One thing that I think is also worth mentioning, and part of the value of going to that sort of like demo tutorial site for the library, is that there are sort of like classes or CSS properties that you can add to like sections or elements on your site where it'll basically ignore those. So if you had like, let's say, some kind of a map and you thought it was like having it try and reverse those colors was going to be a nightmare or something like that, you can just say like ignore that map entirely. So that's potentially a workaround for some of those sort of thornier issues.
Just out of curiosity, how many of our folks on the call today actually use the Gin admin theme?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3,
Mhm.
4. Everybody but me. Got it. Last but not least question, Martin, did you watch the Baltimore Ravens game last night?
I did. It was exciting. Right down to the wire.
Yeah, the beginning of it was a little concerning, but anyway, that's enough about sports ball. Martin, thank you for bringing us another wonderful module of the week. If folks wanted to connect or suggest a module of the week, how could they go about doing that?
We're always happy to talk about interesting modules in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack, or folks can reach out to me directly as ManClue on all of the Drupal and social platforms.
Fabulous. Thanks a lot, Martin. Have a good one.
See you next week.